Okay, if we may, we'll go ahead and start this session. Programming for Pleasure, the theme of our convention this year. And this segment of our convention is Entertaining the Dancers, the Power of Showmanship. And a quote that I have heard is, "A showman is one who can make the easy look difficult." And that is really true. Along with showman and showmanship and entertaining the dancers requires voice quality. Voice quality results from overtones which are determined by the shape of resonant spaces in the head. Those of us here on the dais have many spaces within our head. To present first on the program, this caller has been calling for 21 years. He's a professional caller. He lives part-time in Houston, Texas, and part-time in Mesa, Arizona. He's got a lot to offer the square dance world. The owner and producer of Rhythm Records, and to me, the best singer in the square dance calling business, Wade Driver.
Thank you, John. You're just trying to keep me getting you back, I know. I owe him one from 4 years ago when he introduced me as Mr. and Mrs. Ed Foote. I told him he's been playing 4 years with one coming. I do appreciate that. This subject is so sensitive. I am so sensitive to this subject, as I think as you go from meeting to meeting at this particular convention, and hopefully all of them from now on, that we all are sensitive to entertaining our dancer. You know, entertainment is spelled with 3 letters, F-U-N, fun. And we've gotten, at almost critical mass point, we've got to start entertaining our dancer. It is no longer really an option. This is a recreation. When you recreate, you're supposed to enjoy it. It's not supposed to be work. So, John assigned me, we're looking at this thing from a couple of points. And as he said, entertainment is showmanship. Well, all capital letters, showmanship. And the spaces in the head of a showman can be filled correctly or incorrectly. And he asked me if I would cover this part, and I think since I probably made every mistake in the book, looking at it from what not to do point of view, or show off versus showman. And there's one word I'm going to try to use all the way through this. I hate to use the word presentation. That's formal, and I don't ever remember having been formal in my life. At least once I finally managed to get my way out of Annapolis. That was the last formal day I wish to have. And that's attitude. Your attitude that you possess as you approach your dancer. Not necessarily just your dancer. On stage, off stage, behind the stage, wherever it might be. It's your attitude that is going to control your dance and your dancer's entertainment, because as a square dance caller, we are a leader, and as a leader we lead, sometimes impassively, even not by intention. We still lead. We're looked upon as leaders, and your attitude that you use to approach your dancers is so important. And a lot of it has to do with pre-planning. And sometimes our planning is not in-depth enough, or sometimes we assume, and I'm not going through the little thing of splitting assume into 3 parts. You know what happens to you when you assume, and it's all bad. But just real quick, I was in Phoenix about 8 or 9 years ago. Since then, this has changed. But about 8 or 9 years ago, I went there to do a festival, and they asked me if I would do a 2 or 3 hour caller seminar between the workshop and the evening dance. I said, certainly, I love a chance to run my mouth and talk about what I love to do most anyway. So I intended to do a 2 to 3 hour session on music, on the utilization of music, and things like this. So after the workshop, took a short break and sat down with about 15 callers in the Phoenix area. And I began my presentation on purchasing records and what records you should buy and why you should buy them, and so on. I was about 10 minutes into my presentation when the president of the Caller Association stood up and said, "Wade, there's something you really should know." I said, what's that? He said, none of us use records. We use all live bands in Phoenix. That's when you learn how to entertain quickly, very, very quickly. So preparedness is part of it. Callers are not allowed to be in bad moods. Callers are not allowed to be sick. Callers are not allowed to have a headache. And I mean that sincerely. If you do, tough. You have a job to do. And your job is people business. When the dancers come, and a lot of dancers do come, in spite of having headaches, being ill, having marital spats, having arguments with the boss, having just been fired, a number of reasons. They come because if they go to a square dance, my caller's going to make me feel better. Do we? You know, do we really? When you step upon that stage, do you want to entertain the dancer, or do you want to impress them? I can honestly say 20 years ago, I think the primary intent of a caller was to entertain his dancers and really let them have fun. It was the most fun activity in the world, the most wholesome fun activity in the world. I sincerely question the motives and the attitude of all of us at one time or another as we get up on that stage. And I wonder, are we more interested in impressing them and show them how good we really are, or do we have their interests at heart? Do we want to entertain them? If you get up there and you really want to entertain, you can. About 5 or 6 years ago, I was doing a festival out in West Texas. And most festivals, there, fortunately, some young up-and-coming callers who are there, and the hotshots, you know. We need those hotshots, assuming their attitude is in the right place. At the after party, they had a square dance after party, and several callers called. And I like to hang around at those because I'll steal anything I can get that's good, okay? Anything. And it was right about the time I had cut a record called Hooked on Elvis. And it's not a real easy song to do. It's fun, but it's not real easy. At the after party, several of these young callers got up and called, and some of them were quite good. They were quite technically good. They called good choreography, good material, flowed well, timed well, was technically very good. Okay? The little fellow looked like he was, I'm guessing, late 60s, early 70s, something like that. Had a voice somewhere between Donald Duck and a gravel mixer. Passing by and slapped me on the side and says, hey, young fella, I'm going to call your song. I thought, oh, my goodness. You know, because I saw it was that big yellow thing with Hooked on Elvis on it. And he got up there, and a couple of these young fellas came over and says, Wade, we're sorry, we had to put this guy on. He's one of our callers. And I thought, now, nobody's that bad. Okay? So he got up and he called pattern. He didn't call anything according to today's standards. He called right and left through and dived through and passed through and whatever. Like I said, his voice sounded kind of gravelly. Had rhythm coming out of every pore of his body. And those dancers about 6 feet off the floor, doing nothing but smiling. And I thought when he finished that pattern, this is too bad, because he is called one of the finest hash tips that I've heard in years. He didn't approach him with, I'm going to wow you. He says, I'm just going to make you smile, and he did. And then he's going to do this song, which is tough. When he finished, I almost threw my record away, because he got up there and he made a comic out of it, a comic record out of it, and he recited, as in, you ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. And he recited it. It was hilarious from beginning to almost the end. He hit the closer, which is a combination of Dixie and Glory Hallelujah. And he got the music kind of low, and he recited. And I saw 3 ladies crying, and I almost joined them. All right? That gentleman was an entertainer. And if you're an entertainer first, you can get away with a myriad of sins from that microphone as a caller. But if you're a caller first and you forget to entertain, it's going to reach up and kick you in the backside sooner or later. All right? So, attitude. Attitude is where it is. You know, you have to approach this thing either from a point of view of, am I going to be perfect? Or am I human? Am I capable of making a mistake? And then, is the dancer perfect? Do they have to be perfect? Do they have to never make a mistake? Do they have to be exactly squared off in the right position all the time? Or are they human? Can they make a mistake? All right? And I'm dwelling, I know, a long time on attitude. But it's the caller's attitude that's going to determine what your dance is. And if you go in there and say, I don't care what these people do tonight. They are going to have a good time. Then nothing matters. Nothing matters. Because you won't try to impress them. You'll try to entertain them. You won't try to wow them with your choreography. You just make them smile. Back when I first moved to Houston, it's hard to believe it's 12 years ago, John, when I moved over from Florida. I met Marshall Flippo, matter of fact, just not too long before I moved over to Texas, because he had been on the west side and I had been on the east coast, and never the twain used to meet, until, thank goodness for CALLERLAB. And my first class, I graduated in Houston. By today's standard, yeah, large class, had 8 squares. You can't buy 8 squares in a beginner class in any metropolitan area, hardly anymore. But I had 8 squares, and not too long after they graduated, Marshall was calling a dance 180 miles away in San Antonio, Texas. And I strongly suggested that my dancers, those that could, go to Marshall's dance. Now, this particular class is a very good class. Good dancers. They'd learn the material, but they all were dancers. This was about the time when country and western dancing was very big in Houston. And that was a benefit to us, because you didn't have to teach a lot of the dancers how to dance. They shuffled to the beat of the music, and they just danced, and that was a big help for us. But I suggested strongly they go over there. And this class had learned quite well. They had gone through, I think, 30 weeks of lessons, whatever. And they had gone through basically what was our mainstream at the time, and I had probably thrown a few figures off what was the plus list at that time. And they really danced quite well, and they were very proud of their dancing ability. But they had good attitudes. I think 3 squares, if my memory serves me right, drove to San Antonio that weekend and danced to Marshall on that Saturday night. And our dance night was Monday for our club. Monday, they came back, and I said, "What'd you think of the dance?" "Well," he said, it didn't, he's not Mario Lanza, singer-wise. I said, "No." He said, he really didn't call any new material or really tough, thing like that. I said, "Yeah, I know." I said, "Did you have a good time?" "Oh, God, we had a ball. I never had such a good time my whole life." That's what square dancing's about, okay? Is if they leave and they've had fun, then you're doing the right thing. If they leave and they didn't have fun, I don't care if you call the finest choreography this side of the moon. You failed. You failed in this activity. You failed in this recreation. You failed as a caller. You failed in square dancing. If they didn't have a good time, there is no reason to fail intentionally, and almost no reason to fail unintentionally. If you watch your dancers and you talk to your dancers and you get involved with your dancers in your dance, then you don't have to fail. If your attitude when you go there is, "I'm going to have a good time tonight," okay? I have learned a lot of this in Mesa, Arizona, even more so in the last 5 months. There are a lot of callers in Mesa. The folks that are there are mostly retirees. They're very, very sharp up here. Not a whole lot of empty spaces in those heads of those dancers down there. You have retired presidents, vice presidents, chairman of the board, this type of thing. They don't put up with a whole lot of show-off. They don't put up with a whole lot of manipulation or trying to wow them. They've spent a lifetime of people trying to wow them. They want to be entertained. And they bring you down to earth very, very quickly. And it's a very humbling experience at first. You come off the road. You've never been in a situation like that. Everywhere you go, you got 40, 50 squares telling you, "Boy, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread," which hopefully is a bunch of bunk to begin with. It's compared to what. But second of all, you go down there, you're just a caller. And if you do your job, and if you do it well, maybe they might come dance to you once. All right? So all of a sudden you're calling these 40, 50 squares, and you go down there, and for 2 months you're hoping you can get 8 bodies scraped together that will put up with you for an evening. It brings you down to earth right quick, and you find out, I had better entertain these people. I better give them a reason for coming back, and choreography is not that reason. Smiles are that reason. Emotional feelings are that reason. Then again, there's other things you can do. Like I say, I've made just about every mistake you can make. And a lot of it is what you think you're doing as a showman. You've got to be under control, use good judgment and good taste. And all of us aren't, I know I personally am not always, I'm guilty of not always using good judgment. And sometimes not good taste, okay? And sometimes we do it without thinking, and we don't mean anything by it. All right? How many of you heard a caller say, same-sex trade, or boys trade, girls trade, same-sex trade, if you like sex trade? No real harm intended. Poor, in my opinion. Poor. Little things like that. Think about it. Think about, I don't know how many of you all have children, but if you ever have or have had small children, when you start getting cute vocally from the mic, in your mind, put your little girl or son right directly in front of you back there, paying very close attention to what you say, and then let it come out. Okay? Makes a big difference. All right? Now, I'm not holier than thou, don't get me wrong. Y'all know that. There's a place for things. And the microphone is not the place. That's not showmanship. That's either show off or poor judgment or whatever you want to call it. When the movie Grease came out, not Grease, I think it was Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta did a little thing with his body as he pointed in this direction. And just to show you how bad it can really get, and I had no intent, you really don't think about it. But I had a son who was very much into breakdancing and things at that time, and I was trying to get the motion that John Travolta got, and my body would move that way. Okay? And I'm trying to, because about that time, Ken Bauer cut a tune called You're the One That I Want, which was from Grease, which is kind of a rock type of thing. And I'm trying to figure some way to do this, and my body won't move. And my son says, well, all you got to do is pick your heel up, and then everything moves like it's supposed to move. And I thought, oh, well, I'm thinking of the dance now. This is the only thing that's in my head. And I'm out in L.A., and I'm doing a dance out there, and I'm doing a song, You're the One I Don't Want, like that. And this little lady happened to be promenading around about the time I'm pointing and doing my thing. I may in my lifetime have been chewed on more proficiently, but I can't remember when. When that dance was over and never raised her voice, and she never got angry, but I was very, very ashamed. Because I didn't think, and I didn't use good judgment. And that's not showmanship. That's an attempt to, I don't know, I really don't know what it was an attempt to do, but it was wrong. I'll promise you that, it was wrong. And you just can't do that. And I thought about this, and I thought, entertainment, this needs to be a nice, happy session. And I think the second two-thirds will be. But I'd like to get your attitude right first. And if you say, by George, I'm going to have a good time tonight. I am going to have a good time tonight, and I'm going to entertain those dancers. Very first priority, number one, before anything else. Whether I can carry a tune or can't, whether I can find my corner or can't, I'm going to entertain the dancer. And if you do that, you can't fail. You cannot fail at this activity, because that means that you're starting off with the right attitude, you're heading in the right direction. Everything else falls into place. But if your attitude is wrong, nothing else is going to save you. Okay? Thank you, John.
You know what makes the square dance caller entertain his dancers more than anything else is what you just got through doing right there. And have you ever stood at the microphone and finished the tip of the greatest singing call that you've ever done in your life and watched the applause from the floor? It's deafening today, isn't it? Most dancers don't ever do it anymore. You know, it just tears my heart out to see that. If I were living in Australia today, I would probably continue to call. When I was there last year, after every tip that I finished, I had to walk off the stage to get them to quit applauding. It got embarrassing to me, but I called my heart out. I put on a show for those people because they acted like they really enjoyed it. We've got to get our dancers to doing it again. But we've got to entertain them first to get them to do it. I'm going to tell this story on Wade, and I'll give him a chance for a rebuttal if he would like it. But this is a true story, and it happened in a small town, and I will not give the state or the town. But he was calling a dance to some people that were rural area people, and he was new to the area. And this was several years ago, before Wade had done too much traveling. When I first heard Wade Driver call, I said, I'm going to quit, because he was that good. If you've read the story about him, his daddy would not let him call for 2 years after he started learning to call. His father's a caller also. But he did what my daddy always said, is you don't go in swimming until you learn how. And I thought, how in the world am I going to learn how to swim if I don't go get in the water? And he made me get up on an ironing board between two chairs and practice. And Wade's father had him do a similar thing. He learned to call before he ever picked up a microphone. And I'll let him tell that story sometime, or you can corner him and get him to tell you. But this happened to Wade in a town, and he went in to entertain these people and to call a dance. And about halfway through the dance, he was not able to get them through his intricate and fancy patter that he had programmed and planned to do. The people simply didn't know how to do it and couldn't get through it, and so he backed off midway through the dance and finished the dance with all singing calls. And he entertained the dancers, and they had a great time. And a friend of mine who is very humorous, and he was a former caller, had been out for a while and got back in the activity, and he walked up to Wade with the line of people and got to him and told him how good a dance he called and how great it was, and he was a super caller and he'd had a fantastic time, and Wade's head was swelled out about 3 feet further than normal, and thanked him and all this bit, and he said, maybe one of these days you'll learn enough patter to do a whole dance. I will offer you a rebuttal if you care for it right now.
I am still trying.
No, but it's a funny story, and it's great that Wade and I can talk to one another that way, and that's what friendship is all about. We don't make fun of people that we don't like, or we don't do things of this nature. Next on the program is a young man that I know you'll enjoy listening to, and he's extremely professional in what he does. He's been calling for 17 years. His vocation is a building contractor. And his wife, Ann, if you haven't got to meet her, is a lovely lady, and she works for a veterinarian. I don't know any funny stories about Darryl. I do know a funny story about his wife, Ann, and Elmer Sheffield, if you'd like to hear that sometime. The first meeting that they had, I happened to be in their home when this particular incident happened, but I'm not going to tell that story over the microphone. You'll have to ask his wife, Ann. If she wants to tell it, fine. If not, well, I won't do it. But I have visited in this couple's home and have loved them for a long time. I've known him ever since he started calling. And he does everything in a professional way. Would you please welcome Darryl McMillan?
Thanks a lot, John. Now I'm sort of ashamed to say what I was going to say to start with. When John first got up here, he made some kind of a comment about the people up here on the stage having space in their head, and I felt bad that he had excluded me because I'm not from Texas. Hey, before we get serious, I'd like to mention something about entertaining by accident. And it's really unusual that John mentioned the situation that happened in our home with Elmer and my wife, because that is a similar situation. But a good friend of ours, Pat Barber, who records with Wade, he's from Houston, Texas area, and I were doing a festival along with some other people in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And we had over 300 squares, so you can imagine it's a real super nice festival. And the stages that we called on were just nearly as tall as this table. And we had just finished a tip, and Pat Barber is a very tall person, about 6'2", 3", I guess, something like that. Had on a beautiful white three-piece suit. I mean, he really looked nice. But, you know, between tips, we like to be friendly with all the people, and usually the girls will come up, and, you know, the callers will hug the girls and stuff like that. Well, Pat had just finished doing a super job, and like I say, the stage was tall. This young lady walked up right at the bottom of the stage, and she knew Pat. She spoke to him, and she was going to kiss him. Well, now, her head was only about so much above the bottom of the stage, or the top of the stage. So Pat walked over, and he's going to kiss this young lady, and instead of, like, getting down on one side or something, he just sort of bent down like a frog, you know, just sort of bent straight down with his knees out. And just as he puckered up and was about to kiss that young lady, his pants went wham, just like that. They split from zipper to belt loop. I'm telling you what. Now that's carrying entertainment to an extreme. But now, to make, of course, something had to be done. And it looked good, him standing in a white suit with a blood-red face and everything. But to carry things a little bit further, of course, he had to finish the dance. This is in the middle of the dance, and my wife was sitting right at the edge of the stage, and Pat said, come here. You know, he said, I just ripped my pants. And she said, you want me to run back to the motel and get you a pair? We were all staying in this motel, or condominium. He said, no, it'd take too long. He says, see if you can find some pins. So she ran back down to her purse, and she came up with 4 or 5 safety pins. And there was a curtain on the stage, and so they get around, and they're my wife and Pat Barber now behind the curtain on the stage, and she gets down and she looks this way, and she said, Pat, they've got to be pinned from the inside. Now here's Pat behind the curtain on the stage, three-piece suit, vest, coat, his pants right down around his cowboy boots, my wife on her knees right down between his boots, and she's pinning him. Okay, now that's bad enough in itself. The festival photographer walked up. But I'm real happy because he did not have his camera and film everything with him, because if he had, I would still be paying blackmail, I guarantee you. That's carrying entertainment a little bit too far. That's a true story, by the way. That really happened. Anyway, when we talk about entertainment, one thing we should try to do, if it's at all possible, when we start trying to entertain someone, is to know our audience. And by that type thing, I mean, if you were a church-related convention, I wouldn't want to stand up here and tell you Eddie Murphy stories or those type jokes. It would offend you. It would not entertain you. And just the reverse would be so. If you were an Eddie Murphy type, I assume everybody knows Eddie Murphy. Anyway, bad jokes. If you were that type of audience, I wouldn't want to get up here and sing religious songs and preach to you. That just wouldn't work. So you need to know your audience and who you're trying to entertain and sort of the type of things they would like. And applying that to square dance groups now, and sometimes we don't know these things in advance, and there's no way, and there's where a term called judgment comes in. You have to start your dance and figure out from there. But if I know your audience, I mean, if you go in, usually you can call a tip and you can tell. These people may like to just come in and relax and dance easy material and have a real good light time, and that's all. And that's what you should give them, and they have a good time. If you try to wow them with choreography and things like that, they're not going to have a good time. It'll be work to them. It really will be work. And just the reverse is true. Maybe these people are fantastic dancers and they love to workshop. They like very intricate material. They're not going to be real happy if you come in and do just easy little light things and a lot of singing calls and things like that. And you really run into that situation where you have groups and audiences that are swayed to one side or the other. If you have a way of knowing in advance, that would help you a lot to entertain your particular group. If you don't, then you have to rely on judgment to be able to entertain them well. And that's something I assume we would have to learn over a matter of time as we practice. I heard somebody make a statement yesterday that I really liked about our activity. It said that we are not entertainment. Square dancing is entertainment. We are the facilitators. Isn't that the word they use, facilitators? We help the people to entertain themselves, but the square dancing is the entertainment itself. Of course, to entertain, we want to try to be a showman, and there are several ways that we can be a showman to help entertain our people. And some of them are very small things, and I would bet a lot of us take for granted, and perhaps some of us don't think about it at all. But in entertaining, especially square dance people and square dance groups, it's important that you dress properly. You may not think that's part of your showmanship, but it really is. You can show people that you care enough to look correct when you come to a dance. I'm going to give you a bad example. We went to... my wife and I went to a dance one time before I got into calling, and we arrived at the dance on time, and there was one dance couple there, and we sort of spoke to them and hung around, and they really didn't know what was going on either, not hardly anybody else there. And I said, well, we must have the wrong night. Okay, we waited 10, 15 minutes, we started to leave, and then as we were getting into our car, we heard this voice say, hey, wait a minute, we're going to have a dance. We went back, and this caller had on blue jeans, T-shirt, and flip-flops. He was 20 minutes late for the dance, and well, two couples there anyway to start with, so I don't blame him hardly for being late. But anyway, we went in, and his equipment didn't work properly. We finally, at 8:30, which was 30 minutes late, had one square. There were four couples, counting my wife and I. We were visitors. We had our little dance, which was not very good at all. But the point I'm trying to make is this caller didn't care enough to be on time. This caller didn't care enough to dress properly. He didn't care enough for his equipment to operate properly. I'm surprised he got three couples of his club members there. If you're going to be a showman and you're going to entertain these people, we need to dress, act, look correct, and people do consider that very, very important. They'll pay attention to it, and they'll come to your dances more often. Between tips, you might think this comes under showmanship, or you might not, but you need to get down and speak to people. That's part of the entertainment. A lot of people come for the social side of it, and they like to have you come around and speak to them and talk to them. That is part of being a showman and entertaining those people for the evening. Be friendly with them. Go around and try to speak to everybody there. Don't get off, between tips, don't get off the stage, walk around here to the side, have a cup of coffee or smoke a cigarette, whatever you do, wait 5 minutes, get up, call again. Get out there among the people and make them feel good. That's the point of entertaining them. Make them feel good. Also, there are social activities, especially in your home club situations, not necessarily special things, but I'm referring to your home club things. If you can be a part of the social activities of your club, after parties, after your dances, be part of your club and your social group. That is part of entertaining those people. It will make them feel better that you care enough to be part of their group, as opposed to being a hired employee that just comes in every now and then, and that's just somebody else. He's not part of our group. When you get on stage to entertain people, give you one example. If I had a choice, if I were calling a dance in this room and I had a choice, and maybe you prefer it this way, but if I had a choice, I would not call a dance with this table in front of me. I want to get as close to those people as I possibly can. I'm going to get right up on the front of that stage, and I'm going to rock with the music, and I'm going to look at those people right in the eye out there, and I don't know how, I have no idea how to explain it. But when you get to calling and they get to dancing and you're looking at those people and you're smiling and you're having a good time, they're going to have a good time. That's entertaining. That's entertainment to them. You are being a showman. If you're up here and you've called this particular song 14 times and you know what's coming next and you got your mic and you're calling and you're thumbing through your briefcase and you're saying, oh, yeah, there's a receipt for gas I spent last week, and do-si-do, and swing. You're not part of the group. There is a magnetic feeling there that cannot be felt. And to entertain those people and be a proper showman, you've got to get that feeling going. You make them have a tremendous time with your eye contact. As Wade said, and I won't go into that, your attitude toward making them have a good. If you're up there having a good time, they're going to be having a good time. One other thing which Wade mentioned, and I would like to mention, is the bad taste situation. Don't get up and offend somebody. I know nobody would do it on purpose, but give it a little more thought. I'd like to give you an example on myself. Coming from the South, and I wouldn't say this except I was raised in a Baptist church, and there's no intent to get into religious things. But in the South, in the Baptist churches, for many, many years, dancing was just a bad word. Nobody danced. It was bad, okay? And some places, perhaps it still is. I was very, very proud one time when I went to a square dance in a small town in Georgia, and they had an older Baptist minister there to say the little prayer right before we started the dance. The man was very uncomfortable being there, but he had agreed to be there. He got up and said his little prayer, and then I was to start the dance, okay? He's sitting right beside me, and like I said, I was very pleased. They had a Baptist minister there. I thought we'd really made a little breakthrough that could perhaps help. As soon as he finished his prayer, I jumped up there and put on a record, me and Millie stomping grapes, getting silly, and drinking wine, wine, wine. Bad choice. I should have put a little more thought into that. So you might keep those things in mind when you can. One point I'd like to leave with you for is entertainment. You all know this. I want to mention it one more time. There's only one thing that's really, really important. No matter what kind of list we use, no matter what tools we use to entertain these people, what kind of showman we are, they've got to have a good time. That's the main thought. Have fun for your dancers. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darryl. I forgot to mention the fact that Darryl is from Lynn Haven, Florida, which is very near Panama City, Florida. Thank you. I want everybody to do something for me, and whether you think it's silly or not doesn't make any difference. I want you to do it anyway. And, you know, we as square dance callers, I have had dancers tell me on a number of occasions that no square dance caller is going to tell me what to do. Nothing is further from the truth. Because we as square dance callers have been telling our dancers what to do from the very first day they stepped up on the square dance floor. But we don't need to use it in that attitude to get the message across. But this I want you to do, whether you agree with me or not, including Wade and Darryl. I want all of you to take your right finger and stick it in your right ear. Now, everybody in here do the same thing. Stick your right finger in your right ear. That's so what I'm about to say to you doesn't go in one ear and out the other. As I said in my opening, that a showman is one who can make the easy look difficult. One can learn everything there is to know about the calling profession. However, if he or she is not able to put it across to the dancers in a showmanship manner, all the effort will be lost. Always look to the positive and eliminate the negative. One thing to do in that regard, have you ever noticed, and I would like for you to begin to notice today, and from this moment on, how much negativism you hear around you? Just listen. We have so much in this world and around us. That ain't going to work. This ain't going to work. We can't do that. They're dumb. They're stupid. This is no good. You say, hello, how are you doing? And they'd take about an hour and a half to tell you how bad they are and how bad everything else is around. You know what I've learned to do? And I wish I had known this 30 years ago. That when somebody asked me, said, John, how are you doing? I say, terrific. And you can't believe the amazed look on their face. They've never heard anybody say that before. And I never ask them how they're doing. Because I don't want to know. I say, it's good to see you. But I'll never say, how's everybody say? Fine, how are you? John, how you doing? Fine, how are you? Darryl, how you doing? Fine, how are you? Wade, how you doing? Fine, how are you? Boy, it got good weather this morning, haven't we? Fine, how are you? We're in such a habit of doing that, it's unreal. Turn it around. Make your dance fun, as Wade and Darryl have said. Your attitude when you go in. If you're a partner of a caller, don't start a fight with him that afternoon or after you get home from work, and especially not on the way to the dance. Forget it. Because you can set the mood and the attitude of that caller before getting to the dance by starting a fight. And that caller will take it out on their dancers that night. I've done it. I've been there many times. Take all of my frustration out on my dancers instead of entertaining them and showing them a good time. A showman is a person having a sense or knack for dramatization or visual effectiveness. Notice that it's visual effectiveness. A show-off is a person seeking to attract attention by conspicuous behavior. Look around and watch what happens. A showman is a person having flair for effectiveness. Put good style in your showmanship ability by the way you say things. Be very conscious of what you say and how you act both on and off the stage. The reason I say these things to you is because I've been through all of them in my 30 years of square dance calling. I don't think there's anything that I haven't experienced or any mistake that I haven't made, and a lot of them from the microphone. I wasn't taught, or I didn't learn what I was taught, but we've got to start learning. When you walk into a hall, you begin immediately to be judged by those who are at the dance, especially if it's a big festival or anything of that nature and you're the featured caller. You walk in the hall and you're being judged from that moment on, maybe even before. Be careful of what you say and do at after parties, along with a group of square dancers, and you go out to an after party with a group that are strangers to begin with. If you are a featured caller or a guest caller with the group, be careful of what you say and do at an after party. Evaluate your own potential, not someone else's potential, but your own potential. Do what you do well. Create a good image. Once you create an image, it will follow you everywhere. And I literally mean everywhere. Avoid excessive display. Avoid exhibitionism. Avoid offensive language. Avoid sarcasm. Personal appearance plays a large role toward showmanship of a caller. Callers, develop your showmanship, not someone else's. Showmanship is salesmanship with flair and finesse. I really like that. Showmanship is salesmanship with flair and finesse. It's the quickest way of attracting attention to yourself and your product. What is our product? Entertaining the dancer. Many performers possess natural ability. Others have to work hard to achieve it. Every caller is a showman. Showmanship takes thought, preparation, concentration, and timing. Wade and Darryl have both mentioned this, with things that they have done or seen done. Very important. Even more thought must be given to screening out offensive material. Oh, that can hurt so quickly, and it can form a bad image for you very quickly. I have had it happen to me. I have stood at the microphone and told stories that didn't suit someone and got told about it after it was over with. And I began telling a story one night at a dance where I was, and I said, there was this story about this drunk Indian. And I looked up, and there was one of the biggest Indians looking at me I had ever seen in my life. And I was already in the story, and I couldn't quit. I didn't think I could, so I went ahead and told it anyway. And he stood there and never smiled. Didn't crack a smile. And I went ahead and called the tip, and I have no idea what I called during that tip, because I was worried to death about what that man was going to say or do to me. I expected a tomahawk or anything to come from him, because he was a huge man. And when the tip was over with, I went directly to him and apologized. And he smiled, and he said, "John, don't apologize." He said, "That's one of the funniest stories I've ever heard in my life." I said, "Yeah, but you didn't laugh." And he said, "Indians don't laugh very much." And we were friends ever since. You know, but you just don't do things like that. Learn from the mistakes that we have made and don't do the same things we have done. Use good judgment. Let people know you're happy to be with them and that you're enjoying yourself as much as they are, or more. Project that image through the microphone in some way. You don't have to be a show-off to do it. As Wade mentioned, Marshall Flippo doesn't show off. He never has, and probably never will. And that's just his style. You just have fun. Use good music. Be careful of the music that you use in being a showman. I used to call a record that was called "Living with the Shades Pulled Down." Nice tune, nice country western tune. Nobody knows what all we're doing, living with the shades pulled down. Well, that didn't bother me. But at a dance I was calling in a town a long way from Texas, it offended a lady that was at the dance. And so if it offends someone, it's probably not worth doing. So I quit doing it. But I did talk to the lady, and I asked her, I said, "Do you live with your shades up?" And she said, "No." So I said, "You're living with your shades pulled down also." And I said, "But nobody knows what you're doing behind those shades that are pulled down." And I said, "That's the feeling I have about the dance. It's not anything bad as far as I'm concerned." But it did offend her, so I backed off and didn't call it. Remember the good times. When you're up calling a dance, or before you start calling a dance, start thinking about something that's good that has happened to you or that you know about. And if you will begin to think good thoughts, you will find that those thoughts will automatically come to you, and you will start projecting good thoughts with a smile on your face and having a good time. I've had to learn to put a smile on my face because it's not a natural thing for me. Why, I don't know. And many of you know that I've been branded as being stone-faced, and that's probably the best act I do. And it's not that I'm unhappy. It's just that I've learned to put on an act with it. And most people have asked me ever since I've been square dancing, "What are you so mad about, John, while you dance?" I'm not mad about a thing. I'm having a good time. But I didn't project that feeling to everybody. But I found when I forced myself to smile and put a smile on my face, that I could see a difference in the dancers as I was calling to them. So you might think about it. Good times bring smiles. Everyone has called excellent dances at one time or another. Conjure up the feeling you had on one of those particularly good nights. Remember I said conjure up that feeling. That's what an entertainer and a showman does. They conjure up this feeling, and it will begin to come through. It's much better than thinking about some of those not so good dances that you might have called. Again, learn from mistakes and then forget them. That's very important also. Learn from the mistakes and then forget them. A noted choreographer gave choreography only about 25% credit for a successful dance. Gave choreography only about 25% credit for a successful dance. So don't make the mistake of spending 90% of your time on a 25% category and only 10% for the other 75%. That means workshopping your dancers to death and pounding them in the floor. I'm going to put this message across if it takes me all night. They won't accept it. They may stay tonight, but they may not come back. You know how to tell when you called a good dance for a visiting club or out of town? Is if they hire you back. If they don't hire you back, you know you probably did something wrong or didn't do enough right. Acquiring these skills, these many skills, cannot be done all at once. Some of them will be easy to master, some not so easy. Be honest with yourself and establish your own priorities. All callers at one time or another have been impressed by the performance of others. I don't think there's any of us that probably haven't been through that. I have, a couple of times in my career, of a couple of different ones, or other people, or trying to put something together that was multitudes of callers that I had admired. And I think probably the most starstruck that I was in my young calling career was with a caller named Les Gocher. I did, and I still can call exactly like him. I can sound like him. I have heard tapes of my calling and his calling, and you couldn't tell one from the other because I copied everything that man did except wear the fancy clothes, and I couldn't afford them. He wore clothes like Porter Wagner does on television. I mean, really fancy sequin clothes. But I did everything like that man did because I was extremely impressed by him. And then finally, my good friend C.O. Guest told me one night, he said, John, if you'd be yourself and call your own dance and quit calling Les Gocher's dance, you'd be a whole lot better caller. And he didn't make any bones about it. He just came right out and told me, and it finally got through to me. So I started being my own self from that point on. But you must say to yourself, I am not he, I could never be. I could only be me. My goal, therefore, is to be my own best self. Ask yourself, where has all the color gone? It's fortunate that there are so many different styles and types of callers. Wouldn't it be dull and boring if we had the same type all the time? It really would. You may hear dancers say, I can't be sure just what it is about him, but we all had the feeling that as he called for us, he really loved the dancers. Boy, that's really saying a lot. He really loved the dancers, or she really loved the dancers. If square dancing is a form of entertainment, then you are in a form of entertainment, whether you like it or not. And I feel that we are in a form of entertainment. When we're up before a group of dancers calling, we're entertaining those people. And if we don't entertain them, they won't come back. When you realize that to have fun or to enjoy is an emotional thing, then you're on the right track. You will soon discover that it is how and not what you call that counts. Here's a quote that I want you to listen to. Pay particular attention to this. There is one last fantastic notion which I would like to cover. This notion involves our greatest lack of foresight. The notion that in any established activity you can add the number of basic parts which must be mastered by the participant without hurting the activity. That's a notion. That you can add the number of basic parts which must be mastered by the participant without hurting the activity. This notion has been running wild during the past 2 years, and though anyone who would have thought objectively for 5 minutes would have seen the situation as impossible, it has only been in the last few months that the leaders in general have begun to realize the truth. Does that seem fitting to what's going on at this convention now? that in the last few months the leaders have begun to realize the truth in our activity. That is a quote by a square dance caller. And it was in September 1959 by Joe Louis. And that's how long ago that quote was put into effect and put in print. We got some work to do. Dare to be different. Observe the masses and do the opposite. But that doesn't mean be a show-off while you're doing it. Quit doing Wade's thing. Don't do Darryl's thing. Don't do mine. Do yours. Try to be different. But don't be a show-off. If we insist on doing everything that the big-name boys do, then it is necessary that we do it better. And it's almost impossible to do it better than they do in their thing. Wade can raise his heel up off the floor and do his thing. There ain't no way I could do that. I can't do it better anyway. Concentrate on calls, singing or patter, old or new, that you feel you can do the best. And do them. Don't try to do something somebody else does. Don't be a copycat. Do only the things you do well. Only the caller who naturally gets on well with others or who trains himself to do so can really do the job successfully. Groups change in character from year to year. Those of us who have traveled around the country or the world calling find that out all the time. Groups change in character from year to year. One year they're exuberant, the next year they're not. You must be capable of knowing. And you must be capable of knowing immediately when you first start calling or get in the hall or start visiting. I don't think the caller should talk a lot while he's at the microphone. You're at the microphone to call and entertain the people and not to tell long stories about things that may not interest the people on the floor at all. Do your own thing. Don't copy someone else. Look in the mirror to see what you're doing. In my caller schools, I teach my callers to look in the mirror with everything that they do, over and over and over again. The main thing about it is that mirror will not lie to you. It will tell you exactly what you're doing. All you've got to do is look at it and visualize it, and then you can see what you look like to the people that you're calling to. And don't think for 1 minute that we're not being observed. Even though those dancers are moving around on the floor, somebody is watching what you're doing. Many people have a fear of getting up to the microphone and speaking to a group of people such as you are here today, or any group. And Darryl Clendenin mentioned this to me, and he said, I can call to dancers all day long and it doesn't bother me at all, because they're moving and doing things out there on the floor. They're not like you are at this particular moment and at a sit-down, listen-to speech or talk, like a buzzard sitting on a fence waiting for a sick chicken to die. Be willing to pay the necessary price to reap the beautiful rewards. They are there. Thank you. Now, we have approximately 30 minutes, and before we go into any further, I'm going to ask Wade or Darryl if you have anything else you would like to add at this point. And then after they do, then we have a microphone down here to the front. We'll be open for questions, and we'll be glad to accept them. Just simply come down and give your name and where you're from, and we'll do our best to answer your question. Wade?
A couple of things. That, first of all, and the things we've gotten into today, they're all up here in those empty spaces. And it is attitude, and it is prior planning, and it is things that come from inside you. Now, there are technical things, okay? And I frankly would like to see next year, and I hope that my compadres up here will join me in perhaps doing this session again next year, and with emphasis on a technical vein. I'd like to have a turntable and a speaker and demonstrate, I think, some things you can do technically to entertain, and the difference between doing the same thing. And I'm going to use last night as an instance, and because first of all, I thought that Elmer and Darryl and Paul did a dynamite job last night to entertain the man at the back, and I really did. Okay. And that is an entertainment package, okay? And now you can get up and you can sing a song. And you can get just like this. And what comes out of your vocal cords is identically the same thing. But if you put emotion into it, physical, facial expressions, it has much more impact, okay? Even to the point that I got involved, and I was doing my thing on that mix board last night. All I had to do was turn the volume button up and down. That's all I had to do. But it's part of the excitement. It's part of entertainment. It's part of the show. Sincerity in delivery. And other things, like I said, we can't really demonstrate. But I want you to think about, for example, if you're going to do a tune, and a lot of this I said in a music session a couple of 3 years ago. If you're going to do a song, make it effective. If you can follow the general style of the pop artist on a singing call, do so. Why not do a Merle Haggard song the way Merle Haggard did it? Pop tunes, P-O-P stands for popular, and what made it popular is most people liked it. And if they already like it, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay? When they instead of saying, I can do a better job than that, I can put my style to it. That may be true. But Merle didn't get where Merle is by being Johnny Cash. All right? And the point is, people, 20 years ago, well, first of all, we didn't have many singing calls. Alabama Jubilee and Second Fling and a few others. But today, the dancer wants to get, he realizes his caller, her caller is not Kenny Rogers. If you can give them the same feel, that's entertaining them. And they feel good. They like that. And along with that is sincerity and a little trick that works for me, and something John said brought this to mind. It's sort of like, if you can't feel it, fake it. Okay? With every song, and I can honestly say I don't think there's a single one, because there's no such thing as a singing call that's not special. You know, you go along and say, well, you know, do you have any special singing calls? Yeah, well, I've got this one I do here and this one I do there. Wrong. They're all special. Every single time you sing a song should be special. Every time you pick up the microphone is special. Has a reason, okay? And if you're going to sing, for me personally, I get an idea in my head. A person, a place, a thing, an idea. And I sing to it, all right? I get it's down. It gets a feeling. It gets something coming from inside, and it gives you a sincerity that if it's all right. Give my age, John. New song on Blue Star called Beer Barrel Polka, and I can literally envision the movie with the Andrew Scissors and Bing Crosby when they got up and sang that thing. I can just see that as clear as it was when I was a kid and saw it. It's happy. It's peppy. They were having a good time. Good, clean, fun. Good, clean movie. All right. And I can see that thing, and you get that feeling. Everybody else gets the feeling, and you get into it, okay? And when I was a kid, I spent a lot of summers down in southern Louisiana before the pollution set in and the multi-lane freeways were set in and everything else. And Highway 1 from New Orleans to the Gulf of Mexico was 2 lanes down the road. One side were the shrimpers' homes up on stilts, and the other side was a bayou, unpolluted, just gorgeous. And a song on J. Bar K came out several years ago, but Blue Bayou, the Linda Ronstadt tune. I can't sing that song without seeing that place. And if you look at these songs, most of them that you do will have some kind of nostalgia, some kind of memory, some kind of effect. Get it in your head, and I think you'll find that it affects you, which is contagious, and it'll affect your dancer also. There are a lot of technical things that you can do outside of your attitude, but a lot of technical things you can do that will entertain your dancer. Just through your delivery, your presentation, your mode of dress. If you go to a special and it's a Sadie Hawkins Day thing, what's wrong with wearing a pair of bib overalls and going country? You know, you may be from downtown Manhattan. Big deal. Who cares? Okay? I'm from Houston, Texas, and this last weekend we had our Rhythm Records Festival, and Saturday night we wore white tie and tails, included with cane and top hat and the whole 9 yards. It's fun. It has an impact. All right? And we may or may not call the best dance of our career, but they won't forget it. If nothing else, they can laugh at us. Last year, I went dressed as a bunny, all right, an Easter bunny, because it was Easter time, and it was hotter than the dickens. But it's fun. It's just fun, and I felt like a big idiot. Well, I look like a big idiot, all right, and sometimes sound like a big idiot. Go to your room. But the point is, it's fun, all right? And the whole point, like I said, maybe next year or sometime, or you can do it on your own. Think of technical things that you can do as far as your actual delivery that will help But if your attitude is not positive and in the right place and the spaces are not filled with the proper matter, it makes no difference, okay? So get your attitude straight and then work on this thing, and let's make this recreation as fun as it was when I started in 1957. I'll be ecstatic. Thank you.
Okay. Now, do we have anyone who has any questions that you would like to ask of any of our panelists at this point? You're tired and sleepy and you want this meeting to adjourn. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Now that the meeting's over, I will tell you that living with the shades pulled down is Ranch House 203, and I still do it.